Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, today's topic is cheat sheets are lazy. Are cheat sheets lazy? Well, yes, they are lazy, but like many things with regard to this particular video series, cheat sheets are smart. They're not just lazy, they're smart. It's an efficient use of your time, and applying them in your game is not very difficult to do. You just got to find the right cheat sheet, or you've got to make your own. Now, problem is, time is required to make your own cheat sheet. So what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? What is a cheat sheet? Most people know what a cheat sheet is. This is just a summary of the game rules. Whatever role-play game you're playing, it's a summary of that, and you use it and you hand it out to your players so they can understand or select actions and things they want to do within the game as you're playing, so you don't have to keep explaining stuff to them. In this case, the best summary of the Dungeons and Dragons 5e rules, or 5e rule game that I can think of, is in fact inside the Dungeon Master screen in Reincarnated. This is the new version of the Dungeon Master screen, the Reincarnated one. That very first panel is actually super useful, obviously for Dungeon Masters, but also for players. I have not so far found a cheat sheet that fulfills some of the requirements that I have to make it great and really useful, and something I know my players will use. But this works. There's a few additional pieces of information that I don't consider hugely important, but generally this panel will do the trick. The trick is, when you start dealing with cheat sheets, is that you don't want to provide the players too much information. As soon as you start putting out maps and miniatures and you start rolling dice and they've got to start figuring out stuff and playing with maths and different rules, the trick for a new player or any player is to give them just enough information to get the job done. Otherwise, they don't use it. So what does that mean? That means one page. My experience is if you use more than one page, they don't use it, and it winds up just sitting on the table collecting dust, or more likely it will be used to clean up some of the mess when they spill drinks and food. Now, if you start using too much information, then you wind up with a problem where they just never use it. So we don't want that. We want it just right, just enough information to get the job done. So what do we need on our cheat sheet? Well, I would say for you, the cheat sheet requires certain elements. Actions and combat, top of the list. It is one of the most common aspects of the game that comes up. This is where the complexity starts to set in, and all of the different actions that a player can engage in with their character. So all of the different actions in combat, I want those. Things that you can do, so breaking it down into sort of like a checklist of things that you can do in your turn, such as moving, attacking or taking the action, using a bonus action, using an interaction, and possibly some information around reactions if you have access to it. Now, if you are unfortunately dealing with somebody who decided they want to start casting spells, well, then you've got to deal with concentration with some of the spells. Most of the spells are already too complex to put down in a shorter version and use a summary of some kind. But spell concentration certainly is one of the more complex aspects of the game, and having some way of shortcutting that is always a really good idea. So some breakdown of spell concentration and how that works, particularly when it comes to having to make concentration checks if they start taking damage or there's a chance of losing concentration on the spell. And ultimately, rolling a d20 or 20-sided dice, and the Dungeon Master picks a ability to add to that, or modifier, ability modifier or skill modifier to add to that. That can really all be done at the table without a lot of paperwork. So that can all be done sort of verbally. It doesn't take up a lot of your time, so that's always nice too. Alright, I know it is tempting to include things like the conditions, but the problem is the conditions, there's a lot of them, and most players won't look up conditions. It's quite rare to see a player look up the conditions in the book or on anything, even if you give them a piece of paper. Even if you put the conditions on the back of the page of your cheat sheet, chances are they won't look at them. They'll expect you as the Dungeon Master to know what the conditions are, or that you will look them up for them so they don't have to do that. Now, if you have good players that are invested in making sure all those sorts of things happen fairly swiftly, that's awesome, great news. My suggestion to you is photocopy the panel on the back, oh well, not on the back, photocopy the panel on the Dungeon Master screen reincarnated. Or get a copy of that panel, print it out, shrink it down, print it out, give it to players. It's got enough information there to get the job done. It's got a little bit of information on the shape of a spell, but that really doesn't matter depending on the type of spell they're using. It's got information on long jump and high jump and suffocating, which you're almost never going to use. And that we do not want to have death saving throws on our cheat sheet, because if they're having to deal with that a lot, then something's gone completely haywire, and it's really not a particularly difficult rule to deal with. And as I said, it's not something that's going to come up that often. We don't want to put the stuff on there that's not going to be used that often. We want the stuff that is going to be used as often as possible, so we don't have to keep explaining the same things. So the idea is to reduce the time you spend before the game and after the game and during the game explaining stuff to people. That's essentially how I see it. Okay, so that means when we have a look at our Dungeon Master screen and that panel, you'll notice we have actions and combat, we have what you can do in a turn, we have the concentration spell system all there, and all the rest is just gravy or icing on the cake. But the rest of it is not hugely important. And certainly taking that information and blocking it in onto an A4 page would not be very difficult to do. So that is my advice to you when it comes to being lazy, reducing your time and output at the table. This is something that would certainly be really useful. Now, I have hundreds of videos for players and Dungeon Masters, which you are welcome to go and check out if you feel like. I have a series of videos on being a lazy Dungeon Master, essentially. Almost all of the titles have the word lazy, but the playlist basically says something like Lazy Dungeon Master. And if you look at that, you'll see there's a couple of videos already that are starting to build up that will give you advice on how to reduce the amount of time you spend as a Dungeon Master sorting stuff out. Now, if you want to support the channel so I keep doing stuff like that, like this, that's great. So how can you do that? Well, you can go to Patreon, where you get access to the live streams once they go unlisted. You also get, there's affiliate links down in the description where you can buy stuff from Amazon and the book depository, which supports me. So I keep doing this sort of thing. I also have merchandise shelf just down underneath the video as well. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.